Okay, well, welcome everybody. I'm Captain Eric from the Redmond Police Department. I'm here to welcome you tonight to our meet and greet with our new police chief, Darrell Lowe. I'd like to start things off tonight by introducing our mayor, John Marchioni, who will be introducing Chief Lowe. Mayor?
Thank you, Eric. Welcome, and thank you for coming out tonight, especially on a dark Thursday night. So I hope you are either well-fed or you're going to have a big appetite and eat at one of our restaurants down here. Position of police chief is very important, and it's important for many reasons, and one of them is a connection to the community. In our process of hiring and recruiting, we really hunted on the West Coast looking for someone who fit Redmond and Redmond's culture. We also had a number of interview panels that represented the community in different ways, different social organizations, staff, police officers. But I'd say it was half staff and half community members interviewing the process. And Darrell, I'm sure, remembers and tries to forget the process. Chief Lowe was our pick, and he's our pick for many reasons. One is 27 years in Santa Monica. Santa Monica is a community that's very similar to Redmond. It's more affluent. It's also Santa Monica is also the end of a light rail stop. His 27 years, he has come up through the ranks, so he knows the different levels, and his leadership skills and leadership presence, the command presence, was in the background check, in his presentation to the hiring panels and all, was outstanding. We are so happy and thankful to be able to hire Chief Lowe, and I think his leadership of the Redmond Police Department is going to make us even more connected to the community in different ways, and the ideas that he brings to Redmond. And he also fits our values of community service, of prevention is better than prosecution, that we want compliance as opposed to enforcement. Many other things, but I'll now, please welcome our new police chief, Darrell Lowe.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you guys all for coming out tonight to welcome me to Redmond and for your continued support of the Redmond Police Department. I've been welcomed here from the very start. As the Mayor said, it was a very thorough and detailed process that allowed me to get here. I'm very excited and grateful to be given the opportunity to lead this great department. As the Mayor said, I come to you with over 2.5 decades of municipal law enforcement experience, coming up through the ranks, understanding how police departments work. The similarities, as he mentioned, from where I came from to where I am now, I think uniquely qualified me for this opportunity. I've been here just a little bit over a month, and I can truly say that I've been made to feel very welcome and supported by everyone that I've come in contact with. I want to thank my staff that's here tonight to support me, and that's just an example of the support that I've received since I've been here. Everybody that I've met in the community has been very supportive. I've been supported by my directors team. I have several of the other department directors here tonight. Thank you guys very much for being here as well. Some of the questions that have come in and people want to know who am I, what am I about, what is my style, so I'll try and cover that as we talk. It may cover some of the questions I had an opportunity to preview. So my style is very inclusive and collaborative. I believe in including end users in the process because at the end of the day, while I may be the chief of police, I may make the policy decisions with the help and support of my command team. It's the gals and guys out there on the street that are actually the ones doing the work. So it's very important for me as the leader to include them in the process, so I make sure that I don't implement a policy or make a procedural change that actually makes their job more difficult. That would be the last thing I want to do as a leader, coming up in a police organization, having not always been the boss. There were times where decisions were made or policies or procedures were implemented that actually made my job more difficult. And I thought to myself, if I ever get that opportunity, I won't do that. Well, thank you, Mayor. I now have that opportunity, and my commitment to my staff is I won't do that. The other part about the community. My job here is to serve the community. I am the face of the police department. I am here to serve you and to make sure that the staff of the Redmond Police Department continue to serve you in the, I'll say, exemplary way that the reputation that the department has, so that we continue that high level of service. And if you want to, I consider like that Nordstrom level of service. And as I've talked to my staff, I've talked about 5-star service. That's what I expect them to deliver to you. As far as the engagement piece with the community, I will be connected with the community. I will come out into the community. I thank you guys for coming here to the government complex tonight, to meet me. But if you have a group, if you're a member of a group, and you want me at your group, at your meeting, please reach out to me, because again, it's my job to get into the community, to hear your concerns, to address those issues, as appropriate. The other part and piece with that, kind of how the mayor alluded to, it's about not arresting our way out of our various social problems that exist, both here in Redmond and nationwide. It's continuing to work collaboratively with our other partners, throughout the county to address those issues, because oftentimes it's not a crime or a criminal issue. It's a substance abuse issue, or it's a mental health issue, and we are part of that solution. But we should not be the driver of that solution, because we cannot arrest our way out of that problem. We have to work with those other entities to make sure that we address the underlying cause of that inappropriate behavior, because oftentimes it's quality of life issues. Yes, sometimes it will elevate or escalate to, I'll say, higher levels of criminal behavior, but oftentimes it's quality of life issues driven by an underlying cause. We currently have a mental health professional embedded with us in the police department, so she's able to go out with our officers, respond to those calls, and make the appropriate mental health assessment, and then has the connections within the mental health community and the resources that the individuals need in order to address those underlying causes and issues. The city also has a homeless outreach coordinator that we work very closely with to, once again, identify and address those underlying causes, to work with our community court, to work with our other partners to, again, to address the issues and get the persons the help that they truly need. At the end of the day, if an individual, does commit a crime and needs to go to jail, that, it is our job. So, I would say we would not arrest a person, but that is not the primary and initial focus of that. I'm trying to think from some of the other questions that were asked. Clearly, I'm sure everybody has heard today the tragedy that occurred in Santa Clarita, California, kind of in my former backyard. So clearly, our thoughts and prayers go out to the children, the families, and victims there. For us here in the Redmond Police Department, we have a very successful and robust school resource officer program. So we work very closely with the school district and their staff to ensure the safety of our kids here in this particular community. And one of the specific questions was, what is our department's policy or protocol as it relates to active shooters and those types of threats? Every officer in the Redmond Police Department has received active shooter training. We train for it, I'll say, consistently. We look at lessons learned from the tragedies that occur across the country from the other law enforcement officers, and we tweak our training to make sure that we are ready in the event something like that was to occur. The question also asked, does the officer have to wait for backup or additional officers to get there? The protocol now post Columbine and some of the other tragedies that have occurred is that the officer has to make their best tactical assessment of the situation. They don't have to stand by and wait for a SWAT team or a bigger response. Typically, 3 officers would be the ideal circumstance, but if in the officer's opinion they can engage that particular threat and neutralize it individually, they do have that option. We leave the discretion with the officer on the ground that is physically there to make that assessment. If the decision is to wait for additional officers, again, once 3 get there, they will then move forward and address that particular circumstance and situation. I'm trying to think what else. question portions or piece?
I've got a lot of questions here for you, Chief. And just a reminder for those folks who just walked in the room, or if you've been taking some time to write a question down, go ahead, hold that up, or hold your hand up. Aggie right over here will come around and collect your question, and then we'll fit that into tonight's program. So, Chief, could we lead with this one here? What do you think are the biggest challenges facing the Redmond Police Department, and how would you plan to address those?
So I believe the biggest challenge facing us right now is a staffing issue to continue providing that high level of service. As the city continues to grow and develop, so does city staff, not just the police department, but municipal government as a whole has to also grow to meet the needs of the community. When light rail comes, I think that is a tremendous opportunity for the city in a number of different areas. Tremendous effort has been put into the downtown area, downtown park, bringing quality restaurants into the area. Once the rail goes live, that is going to be a great opportunity to further activate that space because everybody knows now, I've only been here a month, but I understand the traffic concerns and issues here within town. So that traffic is primarily driven by the workforce coming into town during the morning and then leaving at the end of the workday. With the activation of light rail, that will provide transportation options for individuals that will allow them to stay and patronize our downtown businesses, restaurants, et cetera. So that will be a boost to our local economy, a boost to our, if you want to call it, nightlife aspects in Redmond. So I see that as a very tremendous opportunity. With that, there have been concerns expressed about potential crime increases as a result of light rail. What I've done in the time that I've been here is that we've looked at the locations for the rail system, and I'm looking at a 1,000-yard radius around those particular locations so we can establish a baseline of what has or has not occurred in those particular areas so that when the light rail activates, we then have a comparison point for what activity we have, and either there is increased activity or there is not, but we cannot wait until it starts to start looking at it so we can start to formulate a strategy. When the rail gets here also, we have to look at our patrol strategies and our deployment because it's going to require some additional police resources down there so that we continue to maintain a safe community and a safe environment in and around the rail stations.
Okay, I'm going to pivot here back to some questions about firearms. So we had a concern come in from Moms Demand Against Actions for Gun Sense, and they're concerned about gun violence. They wanted to see if you had suggestions for groups or community partners that they can reach out to share the Be Safe Smart Gun Storage Program and also information about extreme risk protection order information.
So with that, collaboration is going to be the key. I know our community engagement unit has interacted with the group, has invited the group to speak. So I think it's very important that we continue that type of partnership and collaboration and then identify other community groups that we can, I'll say, pair up so that message can be spread amongst others within the community. Our neighborhood block captains will be another great resource to come out because in essence they represent their particular neighborhoods, and either to invite the group specifically to a neighborhood watch meeting or to come to one of the captains meetings, provide that information that they in turn can take it back to their particular neighbors. So it's kind of like that old shampoo commercial, tell one person and so on, so you get that multiplying effect as a result of that.
And then a follow-up question here, kind of a policy level question about firearms and ammunition. The question here states that on Tuesday, City of Tacoma unanimously approved a firearm and ammunition tax that's expected to raise some revenue annually for them. And fund programs aimed at reducing gun violence. Would you support a similar idea in Redmond? And if you could comment on plans or ideas to reduce gun violence, including domestic violence and suicide in Redmond.
Okay, 3 different questions. I'll tackle it one at a time. We do not have any retail gun establishments here in Redmond, so that tax idea or issue is not specific or pertinent. There may be individuals that have firearm licenses, but as I understand, the other municipalities law or tax that does not apply there. So I don't think it has direct application here in Redmond. If there were to be a business that was started, then at that point I would have to actually, research it and give it some additional thought. The other part of the question, as it relates to, was it domestic violence?
Reducing firearms violence, gun violence, including domestic violence and suicide.
Got it. So with reducing gun violence, I think it comes back to the education component, just helping people understand about the safe gun handling in those aspects. Unfortunately, in this day and age, it would also include communication through the school district for that, active shooter circumstance. And then as it relates to the domestic violence component, it's just making sure that victims of domestic violence know what resources are available to them so that they are properly resourced with victims assistance, advocates, and the like. And then as far as the emergency protective order, I think that too also comes down to an education component. So specifically for the police department to make sure that on our webpage or through our community engagement unit that we help push that information out and can be a resource if individuals have questions specifically about those particular areas.
And then, Chief, to tie that one into the next question here, I know at City of Redmond we have a valuable partnership with the Lake Washington School District. So this is in two parts. Our communities experienced some youth suicide recently, as well as communities out to the east. And if we have any thoughts that you'd like to share on that point. And then also our successful policy of providing school resource officers to our schools. The question is, will you continue that policy and that commitment under your leadership?
Absolutely. School resource officers are invaluable. As part of my career path, I was a school resource officer down in Santa Monica, so I understand firsthand the value of it and also the challenges of it. So that absolutely will continue. We will continue our partnership with the Lake Washington School District and the superintendent and her staff to make sure that we are there as a resource for them because at the end of the day, it is a educational institution. So we need to make sure that the students, the faculty, and the parents know that their students are safe, but we don't want to become a distraction because, again, at the end of the day, it's about education. But we will continue to work collaboratively with them to enhance the program where possible, to move it out into the middle schools. We cover the middle schools now, but there's not an officer physically assigned to the middle schools. I don't know that is necessary per se, but that would be part of that conversation. So yes, we would definitely continue it. And then as it relates to the tragedy of these young adults or teenagers and suicide, as a parent, it breaks your heart, that would occur. And I think it's a combination of a lot of things. Adolescence is a very tough time period, just, I'll say as an individual, as kids start to come into their own, they start to mature. Then you add on the pressures of school, of sports, and of social media. And, all of those stressors, if you will, on kids, that's a lot for them to deal with, like I said, as they grow and develop themselves. So I think a lot of it comes down to communication from the parents, and then also making sure that the parents feel supported, either through the school district and even the police department. The SROs are a great resource for that because they're there with the kids day in and day out. And the premise behind it is they want to be seen, I don't want to say as the kid's friend, but as a resource for them, as a trusted adult that they can talk to if they find themselves in crisis, or if a student feels that one of their peers is in crisis, that they know how to reach out, how to ask for help on behalf of that other student, and to take away the stigma from the kids about mental health issues and about those concerns. And it's just making sure that they know that they have resources that they can turn to, that they don't have to, commit suicide. I think at the age, they understand, the finality of it, but again, they're still kids. So it really just comes down to making sure they understand that there is help out there, that there are adults that care for them, and that can provide them the appropriate, I'll say, mental health counseling or services that they need.
Okay. Pivoting to some community interaction questions here. So the Mexican American and Latino communities in Redmond are almost invisible to a lot of entities and organizations. What would be your plans or thoughts on including them in our community and gaining their trust?
Trust is earned. And to earn that trust, it would be, as I said earlier, to go to where the community is. If there are segments of the community that don't feel comfortable coming here to the government complex or coming to a government building, all they need to do is reach out to me and let me know that they want me at a specific location and place. You give me the place and time and I will be there. So if there are members of this community that don't feel comfortable interacting, here or at some of the other community events that we have, then please invite me to your event. I will show up. And I think that's where it starts, is the willingness to meet individuals where they are and then to start that dialogue and conversation, because a lot of times the mistrust is based on a lack of information. So I'm willing to meet the community where they are to start that dialogue and to help dispel whatever fears or rumors may exist in any aspect or in any portion of our community.
And that fits right in line with the follow-up question here was, what message would you send to members of marginalized communities who might be fearful of interactions with the police?
That's it. Reach out to me. Call the station. You can be anonymous on the phone call. Give me a, like I said, give me a time and a place, and I will be there.
Next question here is a two-part. The first identifies the question of how do you plan to address institutional racism in the Redmond Police Department or in our community? And the follow-up is, what does true community policing mean to you?
Okay, I'll go in reverse. So true community policing to me means listening to the community as to what they want from their police department. It's not for me to tell the community, this is what you need. It's for me to listen to the community, tell me, Chief, this is what we feel we need. Now, some of it may be doable, some of it may not be doable, but we have to have that dialogue. We have to have that conversation so I can understand what the needs of the community are. And then at that point, it's up to me to meet those needs or say, okay, some things are just not doable. But again, it comes back to communication and dialogue. So that's how that portion or piece is addressed. As far as institutional racism, that's a large topic or issue, but I'll say I'm happy to say that all employees in the city of Redmond get implicit bias training so that we start to understand that portion or piece of it, because as is pointed out, if a person has a heartfelt belief, they're entitled to that heartfelt belief. You want to dispel the misnomers or the misinformation. It's not about trying to convince a person to see it your way. That expression is that you may have to agree to disagree, but the only way you can disagree is if you actually have dialogue and conversation. So if a person, like I said, if they have a heartfelt, deeply seated belief, they're absolutely entitled to that. So that's how the city as a whole has addressed that. The police department specifically, for procedural justice and implicit bias, it's that same training, understanding where individuals are, understanding the historical aspects of why some communities feel a certain way. It probably does not have much to do with that particular interaction, but it's the understanding, it's the history of policing here in this country, because if you look at it, we are the face of government by and large. And in times past, fortunately, laws have, the laws have been changed, but under previous laws, it was the police that were there to enforce those laws of segregation and those types of things. So that historical piece gets brought forward because those are the stories that are told by grandparents, parents, et cetera. So that informs some young people's opinions, because depending on whose statistics you look at, it's about 3 to 6% of the population that are actually criminals. The other 90+% are law-abiding citizens. So realistically, how much interaction is the average person going to have with law enforcement? So what do they base it on? They base it on the news stories that they hear. Or they base it on, movies, TV, or the things they see on the internet. So it comes back to that. It's just understanding that a person may have a certain feeling or opinion about something, and they have to have a voice. That's one of the main pillars of the 21st Century Report on Policing, is that you have to give the community a voice. And fortunately for law enforcement, we are getting better at that in listening. And then that's in part how you start to build the trust, with the community.
And then next up here, a question about engaging with local youth, and specifically, how can the Redmond Police Department engage with youth, particularly teens, to build healthy and respectful relationships?
What was the first part of that about the...
How will we engage with youth, particularly teens, to build healthy and respectful relationships?
In part through the SRO program. The other part is that we have an Explorer program that's specifically geared towards youth. So I would encourage anyone that has, teenagers that need a positive and productive program for them, please send them to the police department. We can get them involved with our Explorer program. And then just like the shampoo analogy, they go back and tell their friends the cool things that they get to do at the police department. And then more youth will come on board. So it'll be things like that, interacting with some of our other youth-based programs. And I know my community engagement sergeant is here. So that is my go-to unit for those particular efforts within the community, and just to push that information out. As they say, the police are your friends. The Explorer program will be is a great entry point for that interaction.
And then it's brought to our attention that we have a very low Yelp review rating. And this apparently stems from about 77 reviews and responses in regards to jaywalking. We're familiar that Redmond Police Department had a jaywalking incident that spread out on social media. I guess the question here would be, how would we plan to address the causes of those perceptions with negative reviews of the police department?
So I would hope that all of you guys here tonight will go on to Yelp when we're done here and give us a 5-star review. I think it just comes down to the interaction. It comes down to the communication piece of it. Yes, it's unfortunate, that things happen. Things go out on social media, and individuals are allowed to then opine whatever way they want. It is freedom of speech. But it's communicating, from the top down to our employees what it is that we expect in their engagement with the community. And as I said earlier, I expect 5-star service from the gals and guys out there serving you in the community. And I've made that clear from day one. I will continue making that clear. So if we have a clear message of what's expected, then at that point you can hold people accountable to that level of expectation. So hopefully as we move forward with the 50 or 60 people here tonight with the 5-star reviews, I can tip the scale on my Yelp reviews.
Excellent. And then following to that, what should be done when officers act in a non-professional manner towards members of the public? How will we handle that?
We have an internal affairs process, so if a member of the community feels that a member of the Redmond Police Department was unprofessional, rude, etc., there is a complaint process. So please call us, let us know. We will investigate it and figure out if that in fact did occur, and if it did, we will take the appropriate progressive disciplinary action.
Okay. Next few questions I have for you here relate to kind of mental health and homelessness. So how will we train officers to understand that somebody has PTSD or a mental disorder?
So part of the officers' annual, if you want to call it continual education training, is a requirement for that mental health component. And a big portion of that is I'll say slowing things down, de-escalating, and trying to understand if you're having an interaction with a person and they're not responding in the manner in which the conversation is going, that something may not be right there. There may be an issue. So to de-escalate it, as I mentioned before, we do have a mental health professional that works full-time with us. So an expansion of that program, not just here in Redmond, but for law enforcement as a whole, would be the solution to that, because at the end of the day, we are not mental health professionals, but we are here 24/7, 365, and if there's a problem, we show up and we try to do our best to deal with it as we're equipped. Like I said, fortunately, the in-service training has started to address that particular issue. So I think, like I said, expansion of those types of programs will help us serve the community better and serve those better that have mental health challenges.
And that plays right into our next question here, is how can behavioral health organizations better support the Redmond Police Department?
Just that. If there are programs, make yourself known. I'm all about collaboration and partnership, with our other entities here in the city, because at the end of the day, we're police officers. We're not mental health professionals, and even the training that we get is just a snapshot, and just allows us to just better assess it. That again, if a person is non-compliant, it may not be out of defiance. It may be because of some other issue. And then to make sure that we have those mental health resources available to the officer. So it's like if you're doing a construction project, right? You have to have the right tool to get the job done right. The police department is not the tool to address mental health issues. We need the mental health practitioners that are actually trained in that particular area to partner with us and assist, so that we can handle it appropriately and get the person to the right services and resources that they need.
Okay. Chief, what do you think causes people to be homeless?
Well,
all softballs tonight.
So I don't think there's a single or specific cause. Clearly, you can look at it. It can be economic. It could be substance abuse. It could be mental health. It could be domestic violence. There are a whole host of reasons that can cause homelessness. I think the bigger question is as we encounter individuals that are experiencing homelessness, is to get them referrals to the appropriate human and social services, such that they can, if it's a program or if it's different support systems that they need to get housed, that's an important part of it. Affordable housing is another important part of it. If you look at the city of Redmond's strategic plan, that is one of the, I'll call it cornerstone issues that the city as a whole is trying to deal with. But it's not just here in Redmond, it's a societal issue. So there are a lot of, like I said, a lot of factors, some of which, I've talked about with the mental health and substance abuse. Oftentimes those are the drivers of it, but then the affordability piece also plays in. So there's a lot of different aspects, and we have to address it on multiple fronts.
Okay, a couple of questions from different areas now. This one deals with 911. So how do you get people comfortable calling 911? It seems like outreach isn't as effective these days. Is there anything specific that we can do to help and help people understand what to do when to call 911?
So you call 911 in an emergency. We have a non-emergency number that goes to the same dispatch center. So if you call the non-emergency number, you still get a trained public safety dispatcher. You call 911 when there's an emergency. And then just understand, a lot of times people get frustrated when they call 911 because they're reporting something occurring, and the dispatcher is asking them a series of questions. And that oftentimes frustrates individuals. Well, so let me try and paint a picture for you. So you have a 911 dispatcher, over here in the public safety building, phone, computer, they take a call that's occurring somewhere in the neighborhood. You have police officers out there in the neighborhood that they're going to send to that particular call. They need to understand what is occurring so they know how many police officers to send. And more importantly, the police officer needs to understand what is occurring so they can make the appropriate approach to handle that situation. So that's why they ask a bunch of different questions. And if there is an individual who is violating the law, we want to make sure that we get the right individual. So that's why we need descriptive information about that person. And again, the questions that they are asking is so that we can send the appropriate resources to that particular call for service. So how would I get people to call 911? Just understand we are here, like I said, 24/7, 365. If in doubt, call us. If it's an emergency, call. If it's a non-emergency, use our non-emergency number, and we will still respond to that call for service. We will still, I'll say, help you figure out, or help the community figure out, if it's an emergency, if the police need to respond, or what resource needs to be sent.
Okay. Next question deals with Lime scooters. There was a number of questions that came in our pre-screen questions for what the public safety plan is for the Lime scooter program in Redmond.
So currently, the police department is partnering with other city departments to help the city craft its strategy and plan moving forward. I believe it's May when the pilot program will end. So we're looking at calls for service, the number of injuries, what impact that the scooters are having on the community, so that we can I'll say craft a comprehensive policy from a city perspective, so that when we sit down with Lime, if the program is to move forward, that we can provide them with clear expectations and clearly defined parameters for them to operate within the city.
Okay, the next question here, a couple questions about Redmond police officers. So to maintain the high standards of integrity and skill that we valued here in Redmond, how will you make personnel decisions, and what will your policy initiatives be, or what do you plan?
So personnel decisions as far as promotion and the like, that's, I'll say, a work in progress. I'll say as my tenure here increases and as we start to look at promotional processes, I and my command team will create a very clear and transparent process for our staff to understand what the expectations are for promotion to the various ranks within the department. As it relates to entry-level police officers, again, my expectation is 5-star service, so I want a 5-star applicant or a 5-star recruit. So we will look for the best available entry-level applicant that's out there, and do everything that we can to support them through the process, as far as once they make it through the background process and get hired, to support them and resource them appropriately so they can be successful in the basic law enforcement academy. And then once they get out and into the FTO program, that they are successful in that program, so that they can then go out on their own and be that 5-star athlete or 5-star employee that I'm looking for.
Okay, this next question also deals with the staff of the department. A number of questions came in about how many officers live in Redmond, and the follow-up to that is, are there efforts to make them a more direct part of the Redmond community?
Yes, but I realize I left out one part of the previous question. As far as policy initiatives. As a new chief, one of the first things you do is you look at your policies and procedures and make sure they match what is actually occurring in your operation. That's one of the jobs as a risk manager for a department or a division. So as far as policy initiatives, is to look at the policies to make sure that they are consistent with best practices, to make sure they are consistent with our accreditation standards, and then where necessary, make the appropriate tweaks or changes so that we are adhering to best practices and that the policies are consistent with what we are actually doing out in the field. Now, the other question as far as...
Yeah, the follow-up on staff is, how many officers live in Redmond, and are there efforts to make them a more direct part of the Redmond community?
As I understand it, not many. Live in the city of Redmond, and then, as I mentioned before, that is in part of the city's community strategic plan to look for affordable workplace housing. So I don't know that there's a direct or specific answer, but as part of the overall, like I said, community strategic plan and objectives, that is how we as a city are looking to potentially address that particular issue.
Okay. For community engagement, what is your plan to connect with and partner with providers in the community to collaborate with projects on the goal of ending poverty?
So again, I'm a firm believer in collaboration and partnerships. So if there are groups or entities out there that are looking to address those specific issues, if they make themselves known to my department, to our community engagement, unit. We will figure out where we fit into that, I'll say, scheme or workflow. We can connect them with our other social service providers, with our human services division, with our homeless outreach coordinator. And that's how I think not just the police department, but the city as a whole can help support those efforts, towards poverty or impoverished individuals.
Got just a couple prepared questions left, and we have just a few minutes left. So if there's questions from the audience, I'll be happy to turn there in just a second. So get ready to raise your hand, and I'll walk over to you. But Chief, what are your thoughts on resources for victims of digital crime, and particularly on online harassment, things like hate mail and swatting?
So that's a tricky area because technically online crimes are handled by the FBI. The swatting aspect of it, yes, that does have a direct criminal implication. If you, send in fake 911 calls, send out resources, we can look both criminally and civilly to recover costs associated with that. So if a person finds themselves a victim of some type of electronic crime, yes, please call and report it, and then we will connect them with the appropriate investigative body, which may not be the Redmond Police Department.
Hello. 20 years ago, the department had as one of its major challenges maintaining high standards for recruiting while somehow managing to get enough officers at the same time. Something tells me that this problem has continued. I was wondering what your plans are for dealing with it, and if you have to choose between standards and getting enough staff, which way will you go?
Standards, I will not lower our standards or our expectations, period. So yes, that is a challenge. But again, I only want the best of what is available. And yes, I'm competing with all the other agencies around. And there are some external factors that complicated dealing with the Basic Law Enforcement Academy. And hopefully through the 2020 legislative process, those challenges can be addressed. I know they're being discussed and talked about. I was just at the King County Police and Sheriff's meeting today, and that was one of the topics that was being discussed. So it's understood all the way up to the Capitol that is a challenge, but that is an issue they have to resolve. For myself, like I said, I will not reduce standards just for numbers' sake. That's not acceptable to me.
Hi, so there were two questions that were asked that I actually want some clarity on. So somebody asked there are communities that are too fearful to reach out. And I know your answer was, well, they need to reach out to you. But I think that's the catch-22, right? I mean, I know there are communities that it's been years and they're too scared to even have a police officer or whoever come and address the community. So what do you do about that? I mean, do you call them and say, hey, we're here to come, can you invite us? Or, I mean, is there something you do, or is there something you can't do? You just have to wait for them to reach out? And there's another question, but I want to answer that first.
Let me start with that one. So I can't solve a problem that I don't know exists. So if individuals, and I would compel the community, if you know of individuals and they themselves may be fearful to reach out, if you make them known to me, at that point I can address it, but I can't address a group that I'm not aware of. So somehow they have to become known to me. My commitment is, if I'm asked to be somewhere, I will be there. So again, if you know of a group or individuals that are too fearful to, even reach out by way of a phone call, an email, that type of thing, if you want to advocate, on their behalf, then by all means. That's the only way I can address the problem, is if I know the problem exists.
Okay, thank you. And so I personally know people who are, even in case of emergency, really scared to call 911. I've been caught in that situation so many times, and they've taken the phone away from my hand. Please don't call 911. And they need to call 911. And that's one of the questions I want more clarity. What do you do in that situation? I mean, is it, how do you, or us or police, either way, how do you help people understand it's okay to call 911? And again, just like you said, when in doubt, if you're not sure, that's okay, call 911, and they're not going to yell at you. They'll just direct, right? They'll direct you, and that's happened to me, obviously, personally. So what do you do about that? Because it doesn't matter race, gender, ethnicity, religion. I've seen all sorts of people always, they're so scared to call 911. And, I have to beg them. And if I take my phone and call, they'll like cry and take it. I mean, it's so extreme. And I don't understand what to do about that. So what is the police doing, and how can they help other people just get comfortable in that sense? Like, call 911, just please call 911.
I think how the community can help individuals that are fearful to call 911 is to say, I've talked to the police chief. He's okay. He's not going to yell at you. That we are here to help through the various community engagements and understanding. It kind of goes back to the other question. Part of this is driven by historical and generational concerns. If individuals come from different cultures, policing is different around the country, so it may be as a result of some of those particular experiences. And I honestly, I don't know that I or the Redmond Police Department can solve, I'll say generational or cultural concerns. Again, all we can do is let individuals know that we are here. And kind of going back to the recruiting question, one of my goals in the recruiting arena is to add to the diversity of the police department, because part of it too helps if you see someone that looks like you, that adds an aspect of comfort there. So that is one of the goals as it relates to recruiting, and maybe that can help to start to address some of the, I'll say, cultural concerns or the like. But again, it just goes back to if you know that, then reach out to us on their behalf. Even if they cry, we can come in and still help.
Hey, Chief, I have a couple of comments. More about some resources and some programs that are already in place. So the Coffee with a Cop program that's already in place, I guess I just want to say I hope that it continues. I think it's a tremendous program to break down barriers with the police and the community and just improve relations. It gives people a great opportunity to interact with the police in a non-threatening way. And I think that it's been managed by the department really well. So I hope that continues. Similarly, I think the Citizens Police Academy is a tremendous program. I know it's going to be opening up, I think, tomorrow for registration for the new year, and I hope that program continues. It's a brilliant program, and one of the great things about it, not only does it educate the public, but having gone through it myself, 100% of the officers that we interacted with were outstanding. And so I hope that program continues. And then the third thing is the Police Foundation is a great resource for the department. And I hope to see that continue, that relationship. That's it. More about just kind of making some comments about that.
And yes, the two programs will continue. The Coffee with a Cop, I just met with my community engagement unit this afternoon. We discussed some different locations, different coffee locations to continue the program. So we absolutely will. And then the Community Academy absolutely will continue. It's a very, very valuable program. And then that gives individuals in the community, I'll say, insights into the police department and how things work and why things work. You spend a few hours once a week with us, and you learn about all aspects of police operation. And for us, that creates additional ambassadors to go out into the community and be informed about what truly goes on in the police department and the why. Because that's the big mystery with the police. Why do the police do X or Y? People don't know that, and that's what they want to know. Well, that's one way that you can get to know that, both for our young adults, our Explorer program, and then for adults, our Community Academy, which we run twice a year.
So to give some context to why some people might be afraid to call the police, for immigrants, even documented immigrants who legally entered this country, sometimes an encounter with the police might put them on the road to deportation. Like I heard about what happened to an IT housewife, not in this city, but basically there was some screaming match between her and her husband. Police came, she got arrested. No charges were filed, it was just a misunderstanding, but it resulted in her immigration file being flagged, and then there was a little bit of trouble with the visa, which eventually did get resolved. But I've heard of families in the greater Seattle area that weren't that fortunate. Like, a domestic violence call could lead to deportation. So I guess is there some form of outreach to better educate the community about how you don't collaborate with ICE?
Yes. So in my 27 plus years of law enforcement experience, a person's immigration status has never been at issue or a concern for, I'll say me personally, in doing my job. No, we do not collaborate with ICE. We do not notify them of our interactions, with individuals. I'm making a note of that, and I will make sure that that information gets pushed out or is available on our website. So if individuals have questions or concerns about that, they can see it flat out. But I'm here to tell you the Redmond Police Department does not ask about a person's immigration status when they have contact with individuals. It has no bearing on what it is we're there to do as we provide service to the community.
Your equity action team addresses those issues too, sir.
Chief, thank you. Welcome to the greater city of Redmond. If you notice around the room, the diversity of the city of Redmond, it doesn't reflect the attendees tonight. And that sends a really strong message. We are here to help you work with us and work with you.
Yes, sir.
We need you, and you need us at the same time. But you notice, this is the reflection of the communities, the minority communities and the communities of color has a great relationship with the police department, no doubt about it. But it needs to get closer and it needs to get better.
Okay.
So at any given time, instead of ourselves listening, reach out to me, I think it has to work the other way around once in a while. The police department needs to learn to reach out to us because we have a problem. Following up with the lady right here next to me is that there is many crimes that we know, we are aware of, not report, domestic violence, rape, many issues because of the rhetoric and the immigration and the ICE problems that we have nationwide. And that's from where you're coming from, Santa Monica, I know you're aware of. Mm-hmm. And what we have as communities of color, more than anything, the Latinos and Mexican Americans. So once again, we are here to help you do a better job. We have no doubt that you're going to do a great job for where you're coming from, but we look forward to work with you. And we need your help, and I think you're going to need our help too. Welcome.
Thank you. And I absolutely need the community's help, and I'll just make one comment. I work for the city of Redmond. I don't work for the individual on Pennsylvania Avenue. So that rhetoric is just that, and not to make it a political thing, but I get my charge and my direction from the mayor and from council here. So that is my focus, and as I said before, we do not interact with ICE. A person's immigration status has no bearing on the service that we provide to the community. And I hear you when you say that I need to reach out. And for every individual that I've met that has said, I represent this group or that group, I've said, I'm there. I'm fortunate that my administrative coordinator is here tonight. When I go back to the office, everyone that I've met, I pass the card back and say, okay, set up the appointment, set up those things. So I understand it works both ways. And then, like I said before, I'm here to listen to the community, tell me what their needs are as it relates to community policing. I don't stand here and tell the community, this is what you need as it relates to community policing.
Great, and we'll take 2 more questions from the audience, and then I've got one closeout question. You had one here, ma'am?
This is a follow-up from your earlier discussion about collaboration with Lake Washington School District. You mentioned there's no police officer in the middle.
Hold on, just lost the mic. Let me check with our folks. I think we're out of.
Speak as loud as you can.
The stunt double mic has arrived. Please continue, ma'am.
Always have a backup.
Right.
So, relationship with Lake Washington School District. Can you confirm the policy to have a full-time on-campus for Redmond High School police officer will continue? The second question is, during the active shooting events, every second counts. So what is department's strategy to have more patrol around the school or have some extra officer available? And is the officers encouraged to get engaged and neutralize this threat as soon as possible as the first priority?
I'll start in reverse. Absolutely, I can assure you, having been a police officer for all of my adult life, that any police officer that's out there, their first priority is to neutralize a threat. But again, I have to rely, and the training allows them to make the tactical decision as to whether or not that is prudent and appropriate. So yes, neutralizing the threat is our first priority, followed by preservation of life and attending to those that may be injured. Yes, it will remain my policy that we will have the school resource officer program. We will have them in the high schools, but understand that I'll say that comes at the pleasure of the superintendent. So I can, as a police chief, say, yes, I'm going to have a police officer at your school. It has to be done in collaboration with the school district. Our relationship is very strong and very positive. So I can't imagine that would change and that she would not want our presence on her campus. So yes, I will, my policy is yes, at the will, of the superintendent and the school district. Yes.
Thank you. This is regarding safety at intersections. It gets really dark around here, especially in the winter, and I don't think we have the best lighting for the intersections. And I'm wondering what kind of attention you put to those places and transparency to the public as to what happens there, as far as accidents or what we really need is to know which ones we need to be careful about, I mean, even though it's assumed, we still need to be reminded periodically.
So absolutely, as a pedestrian, you should always, be cautious and be mindful because a person is always going to lose to a car regardless of who's at fault. As far as the lighting, I will pass that information on to my public works colleague to let them know as they look at things, as they look at our capital improvements in that particular area. And then as it relates to statistics related to specific intersections, I will look to have that information more readily available on our website. We do have crime analysts, so we can provide that information. But as I hear what you're saying, I will seek to make that information more readily available. So if you go to the police department's website, you'll be able to find that information.
Hi, Chief. I want to echo the sentiments of the room. Thank you very much for being here. Welcome to Redmond. You've jumped into a very strong team from my experience. And my question pertains to working with behavioral health agencies. We've seen very positive effects from having a mental health professional on the team. And I didn't know if there were plans to increase mental health professionals, chemical dependency professionals on the team as the city expands.
I would love that, and that will be part of the conversation. That will be part of the conversation I bring to our directors team as we look to strategize about our community strategy and our partnerships moving forward. Because as you pointed out, mental health is one of the challenges or issues. The substance abuse portion or piece of it is also there. I think that's where our homeless outreach coordinator comes in. He's able to help us to assess, which services they need to be directed towards. But yes, I would love to, have a mental health professional on all three of my watches and, incorporate that into the fabric of the police department.
Okay, excellent. Well, we want to be respectful of everybody's time here tonight. Chief, we have one final question for you. And then after we finish with that, there'll be some mix and mingle time right out in the lobby out here. We have some cookies and things like that. And if you'd like to ask another question of the chief, he'll be around for about the next 45 minutes or so and available for some additional questions. So, Chief, your last question tonight for the group is, besides this event, what other opportunities will there be for the community to interact with Redmond police officers in a casual and friendly setting?
Coffee with a Cop, Redmond Lights, Derby Days, Those are three of our bigger programs. And then at the end of the day, the men and women of the Redmond Police Department, we're people. If you see us out there, just come up and say hi. Ask if we have a moment. I had an experience recently, at lunch. I'm sitting down having lunch. There was a elderly lady who came over and says, "Excuse me, I hate to bother you. Can I ask you a question?" Absolutely. She sits down and we have about a 5-minute conversation about it. And it's just that. Just come up and say hi. Come up and ask the question. Again, we're people. We're here to serve and keep you safe. And so it doesn't have to be an event that allows you to interact with a police officer. It can just be, "Hi, officer." That's fine. We'll say hi back, I promise.
Well, Chief, thank you so much, and thank you everybody for coming tonight. Again, let's have a round of applause for the Chief.
Thank you.